Mm-hmm.
So some of the schools, like my total score is well in the range, and 2 of my sections is well in the range, and like one section is like right outside. Is that risky or?
Don't worry about that at all. If your total score is within the range, you've done enough. Yeah, I wouldn't worry about that one bit.
And then another question: did any of you do a sponsorship programs?
Oh yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
All of you?
Yep.
Nora, did you get like a committee letter through?
Oh yes, I did. Yeah.
That was
Yes, I did.
that was great. It just saved a lot of legwork.
Except for the last moment when they're like, oh, by the way, that's $500.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, but I think it's worth it. I think
Oh, it's definitely worth
they
it.
send your and all I had to do too for any of you interested potentially in the Texas app. So they have to send your packet to both places. All I had to do was like stop in the office and say, hey, would you mind sending this to Texas? And then they sent it to Texas. So it wasn't hard. I think it did save a lot of time and a lot of heartache. And it is nice to have your application like tied up pretty and neat and just sent out, with all the letters and everything.
And there are schools that will be like, do you have a committee letter? Why don't you have a committee letter?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And especially for me, I don't know if you guys had this, but it's good to establish like your narrative. And so I made sure to get a letter of recommendation from like each step along the way. So I got, just a standard one from my undergrad, and then, one from each of the jobs that I've worked, and then of course, one from professor and volunteering, and I got one from a physician. So I had 7 letters of recommendation by the end of it, and that would have been an absolute nightmare to coordinate without a committee letter.
Not only a nightmare, I think it wouldn't have been allowed.
Yeah, some
Yeah.
places
Yeah.
wouldn't accept all 7. Like
Yeah.
I would, but by submitting as like one single committee letter, it all got through.
No.
Yeah, I think it definitely is important to get a wide breadth of letters depending on how many years of experience you have or how many different types of experiences you have. Get a smattering from, don't get all science teachers or all like undergrad professors. You need something that spans your experience.
Also, bother them
Yeah.
early and often about that letter, because they've got a lot of people who want their letters written, and it's just one person now. And so, I know Justin, they had written his letter. Owen left.
Owen left.
Owen left. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So it's just Lopez.
Oh my
They have a
god.
replacement.
They have a replacement? Oh, good.
Okay.
But yeah, I would
That's good.
start early on that and get it to them, early, and then like bother them about it. Like Justin, they had written his letter and just forgot to like tell him that it was done and like ready to go for like 2 weeks. And in the breadth of the application cycle, that can be
Yeah,
a huge drag.
Get your stuff in, all of it, as early as possible. So I think the AMCAS application opens in May, and you can submit it. For our year, it was like June 3rd or something, and I submitted it June 3rd at 9 a.m. or whenever it opened. Like I mean, you don't have to be that crazy about it, but get it in as early as possible, because then you're going to be earlier in the queue for when the schools look at your application, and you're going to be earlier in the queue for when they start inviting interviews or interviewees, and a lot of schools accept on a rolling basis, so being in that first pool is really beneficial.
When, how long did it take them to verify your AMCAS?
It took them like 3 days to verify my
Yeah,
MCAS.
so I submitted a little bit later, I think July 1st,
Uh-huh.
and it took them 8 weeks. Like, so the later you submit it, it's going to take even longer for them to verify it.
Yeah, so it took like 3 days for me submitting in June, and I think just the longer you wait, the longer it's going to take. And it's just a needless thing that like has to be done for some reason, so you don't want to wait a long time for that to happen.
About the letters, they have a cheap rockets, like the letter packet LCA service, which is $35, where they just assemble all the letters and send it out. Is there a reason why you need to go that route? Why it's worth $500 to have?
I'll be honest, I didn't know that existed until this very moment.
I liked the idea because I have like all of this different experience, and I had a different career. I liked the idea that the first letter that the admissions committee would see is like a summary of all my experience, and talking about this is where and like selling my narrative, because like otherwise it would just be a random assemblage of letters that then they have to like pick through to figure out oh, this is from that one job that went there.
And Dr. Fixon in the office has tons of years of experience doing this, so they know what to put in the composite to catch eyes, and you're not going to get that from a different service.
At the end of the day, you're spending $5,000,
Yeah.
500.
Did you find the inventory thing that fill out to do that useful for the secondaries when they're in the sense that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the questions are more from secondaries.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that definitely saved me a little bit of time on my secondaries.
Yeah, I went with the committee letter just because I knew I did not want to take another year. Like I would seize any advantage I could get in the application cycle, and committee letter was one of those things. Huh?
Did any of you give consideration to an early decision thing? There's a big risk reward there, I know, as far as the timeline goes.
I didn't because I was applying to schools prior to what I knew my MCAT score would be, so I didn't really have the information necessary to choose an early decision program, because a lot of them will say in order to apply for early decision you need X MCAT or above, and so my thought was, I don't know what my MCAT is, so I'm just going to apply and hope it works out for the best. I don't know what you guys know.
Yeah, a lot of schools mention they have an early decision, and almost every school I visited that mentioned that said, but you really shouldn't do it. Like they said, or if you do want to do it, please call us and make an appointment and we'll talk with you about it, because they don't want people putting all their eggs in one basket if they don't have a good idea of like whether or not they're likely to get in. So for me, I knew I did not want to take any extra time. I was determined to get in that year, so it was just too big a risk for me to take. But if it fits in with whatever timeline you've got, I think it's a great thing to go along with. Just make sure you talk with the admissions committee first to make sure it's a good idea. 'Cause different schools have different policies with it.
I'm not sure if they have early admission for dental programs, so I can't answer that honestly.
There was just so much going on in that year, just cramming all those classes in, getting my letters of recommendation, studying for my MCAT, trying to get a good grade in organic chemistry. When it boiled down to it, I was it's like, oh well, you could do a lot of extra work and do this early. I was just like, oh no. That's I'm at my threshold. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good. It's you. It's you, yeah.
So I have a question about, and I know this is going to vary person to person, but just balancing the time between time spent on school and your classes and making sure you get good grades, and also time spent volunteering or getting clinical experience. I don't know, how would you juggle those two? I mean, because I assume that medical schools want a certain number of hours per week or months of experience doing some sort of clinical experience. I know you mentioned earlier that you had 6 months and then 2 months, and then that was a little on the low side. I just want to get your opinion on that.
I do want to say, find a volunteer experience, first of all, that is fun for you and enjoyable for you, and also that is meaningful. So I used I did the accelerated program with the rest of them, so we took all our classes at once, and it was intense at times, and but I made sure to volunteer for hospice every weekend, because it was like the one thing that I was really passionate about. It became, and it was part of my narrative as a reason that I ended up going to medical school. And another great thing about the volunteer experience is that I found that it reminded me why I was studying so much, and it reminded me why I wanted to go into medicine. So it was almost, though it was a thing that I needed to do for my application, it was also kind of cathartic for me and enjoyable for me. And so I think if you can find a volunteer experience like that for you that involves some kind of clinical or exposure to medicine, and make it a part of your week or a part of your month or whatever that is enjoyable and a stress reliever for you, that makes it less of a strain and less of a burden. And there's tons of volunteer experiences out there. You just have to find your niche and how many hours can you spare. And I would say on average I volunteered maybe 3 to 4 hours a week. And it was always on the weekends for me, just because that was the time I had a car that I could drive to my patients' homes. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I think hospice is a great option if you are ever looking for volunteer experience. I think places look very highly upon it. But in general, you just kind of got to figure out your time frame. Am I applying this year? Am I applying next year? In general, I've heard that places view more favorably long duration commitments rather than short-term, high-hour things. The only things that really don't give much impact at all, I think, are like individual events that you volunteered at. They don't really care. Then, if there's like a couple week long stint you did, maybe if it was high hours it would matter. But I think the best thing is to have like a 3, 6, 12 month long regular volunteering gig that hopefully gave you a recommendation along with it. But on your primary application, there's a spot for 15 different activities. Make sure you fill up those 15 activities and make sure you check like all the different boxes. So like there's like a drop down for each activity, and there's like research option on the drop down. There's volunteer not medical option. There's volunteer medical option. There's professional experience, internships, all sorts of that kind of thing. So try to check as many of those boxes as you can, and then you just have like 4 sentences to describe each one. But yeah, I think overall it's just find the right balance for you. I did like 3 to 5 hours a week for 6 months, 9 months, something like that. It's not a terribly high number, but it checked the boxes, and I got questions about it, and I could talk about it. I think that's what they really want to see.
For dental school, you should definitely, like most of the school, they want you actually to shadow a dentist, and some of them like has a minimum like hours that you should actually spend time in the dentist office. So in the first year, I honestly didn't have so much time to shadow a dentist, towards the end of our first year program, I started shadowing a dentist, and I had to make sure that I get the minimum hours time that I can ask her to write me a letter and actually put it on my application. So, and I keep continue like working for her, and actually she asked me to work in her office, and it was very fun. I really enjoyed it, and I actually realized I really like this job, and this is the job that I wanted to do. So I think it really helps you to see your future, basically.
I would definitely just 100% echo that. Like, don't view your volunteer experience as like an opportunity to just do some work for your application. It should be something that reminds you why you're getting into medicine, and reminds you like what you like, the joy that you really gotta get out of this. Because not only is that then going to be, it's not going to feel like a chore, but then also when you talk about it in your interviews, it's going to be clear that you're passionate about this and that this is like a purpose for you. I would say that somewhere between like around 4 hours a week is pretty standard. Pretty much everyone I know does about that, except for Justin, who does crazy a lot. So I think that's about standard. You have to adjust it based on you. I think that like for me, I probably could have benefited from getting more direct experience early on. So I might have maybe, sacrificed an A to an A minus or an A minus to a B plus in order to get more medical experience. I think that would have helped me. Because honestly, the extent of talking about my grades that I did in any interview was just like, oh, okay, those are good. Like that's it. Like it's a threshold that you have to pass, and then they don't care. They want to know about you and your interview experience. At a certain point, if you are plowing headlong into all your classes and like really trying to get A's and you're just not getting any outside experience, that's going to hurt you. So yeah, definitely, it's definitely up there.
One thing that I do want to add that I wish I would have known earlier is whether it's through your clinical or whether it's through your volunteer experience that you're getting clinical exposure or through your work experience, make sure that you have someone writing you a letter of recommendation who has seen you in a clinical setting. So whether it's an MD, that's preferable but not required. But some clinical individual needs to write a letter for you who has seen you in a clinical setting. And that could be through volunteering, it could be through, your scribing physician who has seen you do that or whatever, but make sure that's kind of a box you want to check. I thought, because I had healthcare IT work and I worked with physicians and nurses on a daily basis, but so I had my manager from my healthcare IT job write me a letter, and Dr. Fixon was like, that's not quite good enough, like you need a clinician to write you a letter. And then I was able to find one, but I was kind of scrambling because I had thought that I had checked the box when I really hadn't checked the box. So keep that in mind.
Any more questions?
So I have a question. Did you take all of your prereqs at Harvard Extension?
I
Did any
didn't.
of you take like any classes, I don't know, in undergrad or like over the summer at UMass
Yeah,
or something?
those shitty grades I was talking about
Okay.
were I took bio and chem during my first 2 years of undergrad, and I got like C minus and a C in them,
Yeah.
and I retook those here. But when it comes to the application, you have to list everything, obviously.
Right.
Unless you're going into a DO program, in which case you can overwrite and just list one of them.
Well, I'm asking because like this summer, so Harvard Extension does summer classes, but of course they're in like what 6-7 week periods. So like UMass Boston does the longer period, and they offer night classes, which would be great for someone who's working. And I was like, well, should I do that or should I just suck it up and take it at Harvard?
I mean, I know people who did that,
Yeah.
and they seem to get along fine. Like Rosemary took physics at BU for the exact same reasons. I don't know how it turned out for their applications, but it's definitely not unheard of. I mean, of course, like calculus and English, I got from my undergrad.
Yeah.
And just keep in mind that you're gonna have to get a transcript from that school too if you haven't. So it's just another thing that you have to like track down, get the transcript, and make sure that's done. But I don't think it's really.
Yeah, there's some marginal benefit to having it done at Harvard just because the name Harvard stands out, sticks out. But the only thing really to be wary of is doing the classes at community college. A lot of schools won't accept it as credit, but I don't think UMass Boston would fit that criteria. So I think you should do whatever works for you.
And for the committee letter, you should put like a minimum requirement.
Oh yeah, good
Yeah.
point.
Oh, right.
Yeah, in order to get the committee letter at Harvard, I think you have to take a minimum hour set.
Yeah.
So if it's as long as you meet that, then I think it's.
Yeah.
And did you guys do upper level classes like I don't know, genetics or something?
I did not prior to applying, but some of the schools that I'm applying to require, upon matriculation, require biochem or an upper level bio course. So I didn't take them to apply, but I'm like taking them now so that I meet my matriculation requirements.
Yeah, if you take, like we all took biochem the last fall. If you take the class and there's like a school that you're waiting to hear from that maybe is like one you particularly want to go to, let them know that you're either taking it, and then definitely let them know once you finish it you get a grade, because that can only help you. It shows that like, oh, I'm still committed to it, and if you do well, it just makes you look even better. I had like one before my Case Western interview, they got in touch with me and they were like, "Did you take biochem?" I'm like, "I'm taking it now. I guess I should have let you know." But yeah, keep them in the loop.
Liv, you had a question?
Earlier you talked about spreadsheets. If you could elaborate on like how you organize those.
Oh yeah, I never finished talking about mine. So I had a spreadsheet for narrowing down my schools. I made a spreadsheet of acceptance percentage by out-of-state applicants. So anything above like 1.5% probably made my list, and which is kind of sad. But so then I kind of made like rough guidelines for like where do my numbers look good in relation to theirs, where am I kind of at a reach. There's no such thing as a safe med school application, but like just some rough grading of competitiveness. And then so once I finally got down to my schools, then it became a manage my application spreadsheet. So it was like, all right, did I get a secondary back from them? If I did, what date was it? And then like the next one was like, what date must I have this back to them? Which is usually, I wanted it to be a couple weeks after. And so then just like continually update it with new info. And then after you submit your secondary, you want to create a new column for like, have I heard back after that? So just keep up to date.
Yeah, I definitely had like same thing, and then I had like conditional formatting that was like, is it getting close to the due date? It'll turn yellow. If it's past the due date, it'll turn red. And then I also had like a column for like last communication. So like if they, so I knew like maybe their last communication was, we will let you know in 2 weeks or something. I need to follow up in 2 weeks or something like that. But yeah, I mean, I used to, like me and Justin had just big elaborate, like you did, big elaborate spreadsheet, because that's like what we used to do in our jobs, just like all day spreadsheets. I'll just take me back.
Any more questions?
Could any of you talk about your experience with financial aid packages, like after getting in? I mean, my understanding is that you have to submit your parents' financial status as well, so I'm just wondering about your experience with that.
Yeah, so that's a good question. Most schools that I was accepted to require parental financial aid, which to my parents, like, chagrin, like, they weren't happy about, because their thought was like, well, we're not really helping you pay for med school. Why do I have to put how much money I make or have saved on here? Because that's gonna knock me out of any like need-based scholarship. But that's like the nature of the beast. It just is what it is. So you just have to put it on there. Otherwise, if you don't want to be considered for need-based scholarships, I don't think you have to put it on there.
I think it depends on how old you are.
If you are born in like 82 or like 80 something, it's like you have to be like 34 or above in order to not need to put your parental information on there, which is kind of ridiculous, I think, but it is what it is.
I didn't actually have to put parental information.
Yeah.
Neither did I.
Yeah.
I did for like 5 of them, and 1 of them I did not.
Well, that's important to note. The school, if you're getting institutional aid from the school itself, you'll probably be asked to put your parents' info down. But for like the FAFSA, for the federal
Right,
aid,
when you're filling out the FAFSA, you don't have to put it in there, but a lot of the schools will require you to put it on there for certain considerations for funds. And I will say, like, I haven't even gotten all of the packages back from the schools yet, so I don't exactly know what my financial situation will look like yet at the schools. But I will say this. So I was accepted to University of Minnesota, and I'm not from Minnesota. So I called them in because I had heard that they have some scholarship to waive the like out-of-state fee down to the in-state rate for your 4 years of med school. And I called them and I said to the admissions office, I said, I've been accepted to a few other places. I really like the University of Minnesota, and getting the scholarship to waive the fee on top of, or to waive the non-resident tuition would help make this a possible option. And like 2 weeks later, I got it. So I think it doesn't hurt to ask.
What was the thing that you sent out the email about? Like, they can see what schools you're accepted to at a certain point?
I think, so Dr. Fixon told me, because, med schools want to accept people who want to attend their school. I don't know exactly how the numbers play out, but in like an ideal world, they would accept 100 people and 100 people would attend there, and they wouldn't accept off the wait list, right? But some people are going to choose to go elsewhere. But if you are accepted to multiple schools, sometime in February, the admissions offices at all of the schools where you've been accepted can run a report and see where else you have been accepted. And that may play into helping you get a better financial aid package, because you can validate, hey, I've been accepted to X other schools and I've been offered this. If you can meet it, then I'll come here, and they can validate whatever you say by pulling up that report. But I think, I don't think the financial aid process has been very clear cut, to be honest. And choosing between, like, how do I like decide which school, which package, because I always feel uncomfortable asking for scholarships, but I think it's an investment and it's worth, they're not going to revoke your application for asking. So call the admissions office and ask if they can meet what tuition you would be at a different school that may be a little bit cheaper, and tell them that I really want to go here, but in order to make it a financial reality for me, this needs to happen, and if it can't, then I can't attend.
Could you also talk a little bit about, sorry.
No, go for it.
Could you also talk a little bit about the timeline? So when did you start to hear about interviews, and when did you start to hear about acceptances or rejections?
So I sent in my application a little bit later. So my first interview was in November, and then I had one. It was November, December, and then I heard last minute, and I had one in February. But I know people that interviewed up to like the first week of March. And then some people interviewed as early as August, I think, and then like the first acceptances go out in middle of October. So it's basically just this 6-month swath where anything can happen. And some schools will send you an acceptance or like a decision within a couple of weeks, sometimes very quickly, like a couple of, like maybe 10 days. Sometimes they don't tell you anything until March. It's like, you interviewed at Harvard in like September.
Yeah, I had a really early Harvard interview. It was my first interview. I had like barely prepped, and they gave me their very polite rejection, March 15th or something, along with everybody else.
So it's just a window, and then even after, like, you have to like, schools will let you know by the end of March, I believe, and then you have to pick one by the end of April. But then what happens after that is you could get a call from somewhere you're on the wait list for, and they'd be like, oh, JK, we want you to come here, and you can swap out your one choice and go to them. And that can happen anywhere up until like classes start. So I've heard of people getting the call to get off the wait list literally a couple of days before classes started, and just like had to pick up everything and move to some random city. So there's not a definite timeline. I'm sorry. It's just a long set of anxiety-filled months.
Yeah, I think my first interview was November 7th, and then I had interviews like every week until end of January. So it just depends. I'd hear from some schools that I had just applied to a week later, and then I'd hear from some schools that I had applied, that I'd sent my secondary in months ago,